Thank you for joining me, Dorothy, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. It's a little late here. I'm getting into the videos late because I was doing other things today, but it's August 28th, 2025. Something big seems to be around the corner here, and I want to share some commentary from a couple of people I listen to. I'm going to share that with you with regards to these particular countries mentioned in the title. So I'm going to start with another one here. I've got to go to first. I'm out of order here, but I'm going to go to the one I need to first. Then I'll come back to this one. Okay. So we're going to listen to Alex explain some things here that are very important. His predictions are quite remarkable. So I'm going to play that for you now.
What is the biggest threat that you feel about the future of Europe and what's going on right now here?
Well, I think that the biggest threat is the dominance of the money lending oligarchies that are still in control of the political class in most of the European countries. And I think it's quite clear from historical precedents, but also from their stated policy objectives that they are going to force Europe into an all-out war against Russia. And the preparations for this war are going to include a new cycle of economic immiseration of the population, militarization and Nazification. And the reason why I say economic immiseration of the population, it's because people in general are not so keen on confrontation and on war when they're prosperous and when things are looking good in their societies. They become agitated when things are just awful everywhere. And then, what you get very high unemployment, especially very high youth unemployment. You have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of young men with nothing to do, with no future, with no hopes of buying their homes, having meaningful jobs, raising families, getting married, having children, and so forth. And that's your dry tinder. That's your cannon fodder for war. And you need millions of those. And so I think that the economic devastation of Europe is going to continue deliberately. And then the ruling class is going to keep on fear-mongering against Russia and making sure that this war in Ukraine doesn't die, that it continues, and that, come 2028, 29, 2030, European nations can join the fight directly rather than just by proxy, because by then, we will have run out of the last Ukrainian, and then the war will die. But now, it seems that the war might die well before 2028. And so that creates a huge problem. And I think that they are now accelerating preparations for a different war. And that different war might be focused on the Balkans. And I think that two lines of attack are now being developed as far as I can see. One of them is in Bosnia, a confrontation with Serbia. And the other one might be the confrontation between Greece and Turkey, in which then, Israel might play a role as an adversary to Turkey, because as it is, in Syria, Turkey and Israel are stuck on what looks like an irreversible collision course, one against the other. And so right now, it seems that Greece is being armed to their teeth for a future confrontation with Turkey. We've seen in Europe Donald Trump has had to push very, very hard to get European countries to increase their military defense spending. And they were kicking and screaming to reach 2%. And now they're planning 5%, somewhere along the future. But this is an almost impossible goal. Greece is already at 3.8% of the GDP in military spending. And this is being done with the assistance of NATO, of the UK, and Israel. And it's being done practically overtly as a preparation for a showdown against Turkey. And then Turkey has, I'm not sure how formal it is, but it has some kind of a defense pact with Albania. And it has also military cooperation arrangements with the Republic of North Macedonia, the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. And it seems that all of these countries have military cooperation agreements with Great Britain. And then recently, this year at some point, Croatia entered into a military alliance with Albania, which is then linked with some form of military alliance with Turkey, and with Bulgaria. Croatia is now in a military alliance with Albania and Bulgaria. And then in February of this year, Great Britain also signed a military cooperation agreement with the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is where the confrontation against Serbia might get sparked, because in Bosnia and Herzegovina you have three constituent nationalities. You have Serbs, who are Orthodox Christians, you have Croats, who are Catholics, and you have the Muslims, which have been increasingly radicalized, because Muslims in former Yugoslavia were a minority, but they were not even, they were practically not noticeable. They looked like you and I, and unless you asked, you didn't know that they were Muslims, men and women. Now, the Wahhabi, the Wahhabi stream, the Wahhabi current has taken over in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and now these Wahhabi groups are starting to be used to stage provocations, and foreign-funded NGOs and private contractors are being used to fund these groups who are staging provocations. So we have now very strange circumstances where, you had about 2-3 weeks ago, you had an escalation of anti-government demonstrations in Belgrade. And the Serbian intelligence agencies determined that these protests were being funded from Croatia, which makes no sense whatsoever. Croatia as a government and as a people and as a state has no reason to go undermine Serbia. It would be like, setting your own block on fire. And then there were several provocations set up between Muslims and Croats, where you had these burqa-clad women come into a 100% Croatian village and then set up to pray in a public place, and somebody was taking a video, and then some local came there and said, like, hey, what are you doing here? Get the hell out of here. And then this video circulates, and then some Wahhabi group planned to bring 1,000 Muslims to pray in this 100% Croatian village. And then Croatian intelligence agencies determined that that was being funded from Serbia, which also makes no sense whatsoever. Serbian government, the Serbian state, has no reason to provoke the Croats in this way. So somebody is doing it. And then if you'll remember what happened in Georgia not so long ago, that Georgian government said, okay, if you have an NGO, if you have like some kind of a quasi-independent private organization that's receiving more than 25% of its funding from abroad, you have to declare the sources of that funding. And then the Western governments lost their heads. How dare they? This is this is against democracy and blah blah blah. But you can now see the reasons, because if you have like NGOs from Croatia funding provocations against Serbia, and then NGOs from Serbia funding provocations against Croatia and against Croats in Bosnia, then it would be nice to find out, where do these NGOs get their funding? Where does the money ultimately come from? Where, well, they don't have to declare it. In Georgia, they have to declare it now, but here they don't have to declare it. So all you see is Croats provoking Serbs, Serbs provoking Croats, and the pot is being stirred for a future conflict. And then I presume that similar things will be happening in Turkey, in Lebanon, on Cyprus, between the Cypriot Greeks and the Turks, and that then the second front of the West's war against Russia will open in the Balkans, as the RUSI think tank said was inevitable. RUSI stands for Royal Information Services Institute. No, Royal United Services Institute, RUSI. One of the leading London-based think tanks, who said that opening of the second front in the war against Russia is inevitably going to open in the Balkans. So we now see this. Anyway, that's a long answer to your question. What's going on in Europe and what's worrying me the most? This is worrying me the most because if unchecked, it could easily escalate to World War III and to a collective confrontation between the Western powers and Russia. And the Western powers at the moment excludes the United States, because Donald Trump said, thank you very much, I'm not doing this anymore. If you want to go to war, it's going to be without the United States. But that's what happens in another 3.5 years. Maybe we get some new Biden or Obama or Jake Sullivan or Anthony Blinken into the White House, and then the United States might join the war as well, which is why Europeans are undeterred. They think...
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could listen to this all day, because all of his stuff is so informative. We're just going to go over what he was just discussing. It's really important because it aligns with what's going on with what many of the elders and saints are saying with regard to World War III. And if you've been following my videos and my channel, you know that I've been keeping up on this a lot. But the thing that's very interesting here was, I check in on the Greece-Turkey thing, and, I see the usual back and forth bickering and things about, yes, there's some things about Cyprus, there's some things about Libya, there's some things about, what type of weapons or fighter jets that each of them are getting, so from different places. I didn't know about this, so I thought this was very interesting. He really mentions the Greek-Turkey issue. He mentions the Balkan issue. These are all like ways to destabilize and to distract and to cause more chaos for Russia, because Russia right now is still trying to get done with the Ukrainian issue. There was that. So the way he was explaining the Balkan issue is very important, because that is also a part of the prophecies. That's, as he says, it's like the next phase, the next plan is going to be what he mentioned, the Balkans and the Greece-Turkey thing. And then he had said about his worry about World War III. Of course, yes, that makes sense. So it's interesting that he mentions the Serbia-Croatia thing. and how they're going to be they're being used against each other with these NGOs and causing problems, which is exactly what I showed you in that report of the history of what we've been doing to Serbia, and in the last time, and it was Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia that were involved, and here it's the same game plan. So really important things here. There's a second part I'll play really quickly for you, a couple minutes. I'll jump ahead just so Alex can finish up what he was saying on this particular subject, and then I'm going to go to the next one. Okay, so let's go back in here. Let me see where I need to go. Okay.
All the way, you would probably always get to the British Foreign Office to organizations like MI6. And we've already seen this happen in Syria, in Lebanon,
Talking about British.
in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Somalia, Myanmar, and all of these things, all of these places, what they have in common is that they ended up experiencing regime changes, coups, civil wars, or outright wars against, like between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, between Syria and these terrorist proxy forces that are also ultimately supported by the British, like HTS. And so I think that this is their last hurrah, their endeavor to retain hegemony over Eurasian landmass. They don't have the military to do it. The United States is no longer on board. So all they can do is continue these arson attacks against peace. And I think that the 5 that Politico listed may seem like the most likely ones, but I think that there are many others. There's always Azerbaijan, Armenia, Greece, Turkey. There's no shortage of these crisis flashpoints that could emerge, and so it's unless the opposing powers like Russia, China, the United States, Iran, and others find strength and wisdom to push back against this, we might see more escalations in some of those flashpoints. And my fear is that it might involve Greece, Turkey, and the Balkans.
Yes. So everything he's saying, amazingly, lines up with Elder Joseph of Vatoputty's 7 phases, quote unquote, just the way they have set it out, whoever put that together. But his World War III prophecies and all the different countries involved and the specifics of that, which I will get into here after I give you this one other video, just a short portion with George Galloway and Colonel McGregor, because again, I hadn't heard anything on this, so I want to share what I have found out on it. Let's see, where was that?
I'm very worried indeed about the Persian Gulf. The Russians have evacuated their embassy in Tel Aviv, and the Americans have abandoned 2 of their most vulnerable military bases in Iraq, very peremptorily indeed. And Russia kind of knows from both sides what's going on. They have a relationship with Israel, and they have a very close relationship now with Iran. They seem to think, and the American government seems to think, that the balloon might be about to go up there again. Do you think so?
I've been expecting something in September, latest October, because the Greater Israel Project has no chance of success. And I think Mr. Netanyahu knows this, unless they can ultimately balkanize and destroy Iran. So the war has to continue. There's no question about that if you're an Israeli. On the other hand, I'm not sure exactly when. I know that a lot of materiel, theater high altitude air defense missiles and equipment are being shipped to Israel. So I know we're busy trying to assist the Israelis with regard to defending themselves. And of course, they have limitless ammunition from us and whatever else they need. I know the Russians have been on the ground in Iran trying to repair, restore, and ultimately improve their integrated air defenses. So a war is inevitable in terms of, happening again. We just don't know exactly when. And these evacuations from Iraq are interesting, because I remember when President Trump was president the first time around in 2020, when I was working for him, he was very interested in getting us completely out of Syria and Iraq. And of course, he was obstructed at that point. So for this to happen suggests that something is indeed building, but none of us knows when or how it will happen.
Well, turning then to the war that...
Okay. This is important once again, because I didn't even realize that was happening. That I didn't find it in any stories that I was looking through. But this thing about the Russian embassy, that there are people leaving Tel Aviv, and then I heard about the American troops in Iraq leaving certain bases and going some other base. So they were leaving certain areas there. I just thought about this. There's a portion in, and we'll go into it, the portion of the phases of World War III, Elder Joseph mentions about the U.S. soldiers in the southern portion of Iran. So I wonder if that has anything to do with it. We're going to go in there and we're going to go over this in just a minute. So all of this is really important. I want to also say that my son and I were talking earlier, right after dinner, about everything that's going on. And I gave him some information I had been following, but he said something very interesting. He said he wasn't really worried about Israel. He was actually worried about the United States, our country, because what he said was we tend to use Israel for our means, which I have heard another analyst actually say that. I can't remember which one it is. I listened to 3 or 4, but one of them said it's really we who are in charge of what happens with Israel. It's not the other way around. But in any case, he was saying that, because I told him about the Balkan issue, the Balkan countries' issues that is out there. That I told him about what Alex had said about that, Alex Craner, and then also the Greece-Turkey issue and all that. Well, this is Nicholas, my son, believes that this is why Russia's going to hurry and finish the Ukraine issue to get down to Azerbaijan and that area, because what's going on there with the corridor, the Zangezur corridor and all that, and the West, U.S. and the West trying to take over that Middle Eastern area where Russia has been traditionally the country that has been the one in that area working to stabilize it. And now the West is trying to encroach on that and bring it in and take Russia out of that position. So he thinks that when, and McGregor was saying, September, early October, when Israel and Iran start their second conflict, because everybody knows that's coming. He thinks that the U.S. really doesn't care about Israel and what's going to happen with them, because I think it's going to be, I think Iran is going to really slam Israel. But the U.S., he sees that whole thing with the U.S. and Iran, he sees that as a distraction so that they can do what they're going to be doing with the other portion, which is the Balkan issue. So that they're to try to destabilize, to cause even more chaos for Russia. And I guess they figure that's the way that's their way, that's their plan B of how they are going to bring Russia down. Now, prophecy says that's not going to happen, but that it sounds like that's what Alex is saying, and what the agenda is. So let's go in to these. Let's see here. I need to go back. Okay. We're going to go back to this page, because this is this part, the part 2, because this is an attack by America and Israel against Iran is imminent. Now that one happened, but I'm wondering if that's part 2. That'll be part 2 at some point here. So it could be that was the first part of that, and then it comes in later with the second part below in number 3. But that happened already. Okay. Now we need to go into this next part, which I'll read again. But war will also break out in our neighborhood. Albanians, Croats, Bosnian, Muslims, Americans, and a few NATO members against the Orthodox of Russia and Serbia. So that's the Balkan agenda that Alex Craner was just talking about, okay? In Greece, the government will fall and we will go to elections. Then exactly the junta that will rule Turkey will attack us, but the Russians will move quickly southwards. And now, before we get to that, let's get to the next sentence. The Russians will have previously invaded Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, pushing back the American troops. So it shows you that Russia's already going to be there, and it falls in right with Alex's, is what he said, that the Balkan issue is going to be coming up here soon, whenever that is, whenever it's going to happen. That seems to be a main thing that's going to come about. But it seems that Russia will have finished up. I'm not sure if it's actually shown in this portion, but the whole thing with its fight with Ukraine. So, and it talks about Russia going down to other countries, and as I've discussed before, the Serbs and the Romanians will rise up and overthrow their corrupt governments. That's another thing I discussed before, allying themselves with the Russians. Then the Russians will go down south to help their Arab allies. So after they've just dealt with all that other stuff, they're going to go down, the Serbia, that ain't. Then they're going to go down and help the Arab allies. So, and that would be especially the Iranians. Now, he said this in I think in like 2007. So that it's just amazing, because everything seems to be right around what he and others have been saying, other elders and saints. So I just wanted to show you that. I thought it was really important, because it seems that this is on the horizon. I always say we don't know when, we don't have the exact time, obviously. We don't have dates, we don't have exact times, but everything seems to be coming to some kind of climax here of something big coming, and that big is what Alex described, in my opinion, with the Balkans and the Greece-Turkey thing, which is another important one, especially with the Cyprus issue and all that, because Cyprus has been having an invasion of the Israelis that were leaving Israel because of all the war going on there with Gaza, and the attacks, basically not that really, because of what happened with when Iran was attacking Israel. That's when they wanted to get out, and at first they weren't even allowed to leave. They couldn't leave, but some of the rich people were able to leave on their yachts, their boats, and they went to Cyprus. And so they ended up opening all these, they ended up going in and taking up so much land, so many developments of, neighborhoods. And it was concerning the mayor in that area. I think it was the mayor or the political representative of that area that they were in Cyprus, in the Greece side. He was concerned that there was so many of them coming in, that he was concerned about the Greek traditions and heritage and their way of life. And of course, he was called anti-Semitic, but it made perfect sense why they would feel that way. Why he would feel that way. But let's think about this for a minute. And I believe he brought this up later. I may have not had it on this, but what I shared with you. But Alex Craner did say that Turkey would be, because of Israel coming into Cyprus, where Turkey is also occupying part of Cyprus, that Turkey will feel like, oh, well, we have to take over all of Turkey because we need to push back the Israelis. And the Greeks aren't going to like that. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. And if you have something happening with evacuations, usually that means something like it did before Israel attacked Iran. They had the same kind of thing going on. So we are almost in September. And let's pray. Let's pray that it's as they said, that God lessens what's to come. Let's just keep praying on this. Be vigilant. We'll just keep vigilant and pray. And thanks so much for watching, for following my channel. I hope this was informative to you and helpful. And always know that God is with us, and prophecies other than the core issue of World War III, the little things can change, and also some of this stuff can be pushed back through our repentance, prayer, and all that of repentance and mercy. But just keep an eye out of what's going on here. I try to keep you informed on all this, and I hope it's helpful to you. I hope you have a blessed evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are when you see this. Thanks so much again for watching, and until next time.